Normally, when you go to at least 4 championships in your given sport, you strive above all else. You pick up the pace. You at least win one of them. Like in hockey, like there's no 0-4 teams in hockey when it comes to the finals. The worst is the Vancouver Canucks making it to the 82, 94, and 2011 finals, losing each time to being 0-3. You have yourself a variety of teams in the NBA who are 0-2, but no NBA teams 0-3 in the finals. At least when you make 3 finals appearances, you've been in one. In baseball, the Texas Rangers are the were the worst at 0-2, but before winning in 2023. But now it's up to the San Diego Padres, who've been to the World Series in 84 and 98 and have not won a championship. And in football, you got yourself, of course, the Buffalo Bills. 91, 92, 93, 94 in the Super Bowl and losing. But we're not talking about the Buffalo Bills this time. We're talking about a team that should have been there, another franchise that has lost 4 Super Bowls and none since the 1970s, which is shocking enough. For how bad Buffalo is, at least they've gotten to a Super Bowl since my birth in 1985. This team has not. So let's take a look at one of the most shocking 15-1 teams to not make the NFL playoff, the finals. It's the 1998 Minnesota Vikings. So get ready. I said, are you ready? Are you ready for some Cutter What If NFL football? A weekend invasion! Yeah, it's Cutter talking to you live. We got the hits and the misses. So come join me for all the fun. All the rowdy fans come in. It's the weekend, y'all. Are you ready? Yeah, let's do this, baby. Yes. So, let's talk about the Minnesota Vikings. In 1961, the NFL decided, in their wisdom, to give them an expansion team. The state of Minnesota has always been a good college football team, with the Golden Gophers being one of the best teams in the 30s and 40s. So Minnesota was born in 1961, and they got this hard-nosed coach from the CFL, bitches. His name is Bud Grant, who is an icon, who just passed last year, which is amazing. 95 years old. Yeah, he was a Winnipeg head coach, winning 3 Grey Cups. I don't care how you think how easy it is to win in the CFL. It's hard and all that stuff. Regardless of that, the Vikings were good. They picked up where they left off. They had some growing pains, but expansion teams always do. And then by the early 70s, they were dominant. They had a good offense. Fred Tarkenton was a good quarterback. Chuck Foreman, a good running back. Good wide receivers. I can't think of any off the top of my head for some effed up reason. But the purple people leaders on the defense: Jim Marshall, Alan Page. Uh, yeah, I'm not a Vikings fan, so I don't know. Gary Larson. I can't think of the fourth one off the top of my head. But regardless of that, Minnesota had some great defense. Paul Krause at safety. Yeah, and Fred Cox at kicker. The Vikings went to Super Bowl 4 and lost to the Chiefs in what would be the last Super Bowl between AFL and NFL teams, as the AFL merged with the into the NFL and basically all that. So anyway, so the Vikings, that was their first strike with Joe Kapp, former CFLer, at quarterback. Strike two was in 1974 when they were facing the Dolphins, trying to make the back-to-back Apple Jacks Super Bowl and becoming one of the second franchise to do so after the Packers winning the first 2 Super Bowls. So the Miami Dolphins um, beat them. It was not too easy. So the Vikings only could score 7 measly points against them. So anyway, the Dolphins would crush them. And then in 1975, the next year, the Vikings were the best team in the NFC, and then they fell in the Super Bowl to the Pittsburgh Steelers, who were making their first Super Bowl appearance in team history. They finally got rid of that Miami curse. Regardless of that, the Vikings had a golden chance the next year, but Dallas beat them in what is recorded as one of the first Hail Marys in NFL history, as Staubach to Drew Pearson, although a lot of people said it was offensive pass interference. Nevertheless, the Vikings would plunder on. And a couple years later, in 1977, they got to the Super Bowl 11 against the Raiders. But with the Raiders, with John Madden being carried out the field, old man Willie Brown with the pick six, the Vikings fell flat for the fourth time. People thought the Vikings would keep trying. Tarkenton kept trying. Minnesota kept trying, but they failed. And unfortunately, it's the last time the Vikings made the Super Bowl, and it's almost been 5 decades as of this recording. So the Vikings have had some great moments and all that. In the 80s, they shocked a lot of people in the 1987-88 playoffs. They had to win the wild card game in New Orleans against the Saints in their first ever playoff appearance. Well, the Saints franchise, but they did it. Wade Wilson put up some great points. The Vikings won the game. The Vikings would head to San Francisco and shock the 13-2 49ers in the divisional round, went to the NFC title game in Washington, and were a fourth and goal away from shocking Washington, maybe going to the Super Bowl. But then the Vikings slumped, and then they decided to mortgage their future by getting Herschel Walker from the Cowboys for 5 players and 5 draft picks. And the Cowboys would parlay those draft picks into other picks and get some key players like Emmitt Smith and Leon Lett even. The Vikings weren't really the great team in the 90s and all that. Herschel Walker can only go so far. Of course, we're going to talk about the 98 Vikings in a little bit. But anyway, the Vikings in 2001 got to the NFC title game against the Giants at Giants Stadium and got their asses handed to them 41-0 in the largest NFC title game deficit ever. The Eagles against Washington were not that far, but yeah, 41-0. The Giants would get their butts handed to them in the Super Bowl by the Ravens defense. The Vikings had some moves. Randy Moss mooning the crowd in Green Bay and Joe Buck having a freak out, even though that it was a simulation. The Vikings with their party boats problems, and they kept trying. They had a good season last year, but just fell in the playoffs. I think it was the Rams who got them. Someone got them, and they should not have. So anyway, let's talk about the 1998 Vikings, shall we? So let's talk about the 1998 Vikings, the 38th in NFL history. They were the third team in NFL history to win 15 games during the regular season, tying the 1984 San Francisco Niners and the 1985 Chicago Bears, who both won the Super Bowl those years. So it looked like they were going to win a chance to be in the Super Bowl. They were the favorite to win the Super Bowl, but lost in the NFC title game. Regardless, the 98 Vikings team was known for their offense, as Randall Cunningham had a career resurgence after being the running quarterback of Philadelphia. He became more of a passing quarterback and worked. Robert Smith at running back, Chris Carter, a great wide receiver, and then Randy Moss, who the Vikings took after he dropped in the standings in the draft rankings because of his character. Dallas could have picked him up, but didn't. And Randy Moss did his job as a guy under Chris Carter's wings. They put up 556 points, which was an NFL record until those pesky Patriots did it in 2007. Moss would make 17 touchdown catches, the most by a rookie. And let's not forget his Thanksgiving Day game heroics in Dallas, as he got 3 touchdowns on 3 receptions for more than 150 yards, birdieing the Cowboys and making the wish, damn it, why didn't we pick him? On special teams, Gary Anderson made every field goal and every extra point, becoming the first person kicker to do so. The Vikings were 6th in points allowed. Not number 1, but hey, John Randall was a good player. So the Vikings screwed up. They were 15-1 and should have won the trip to the Super Bowl. It was one of the most devastating losses in NFL history, if not Vikings history. And everyone said that the 98 Vikings were the greatest team in NFL history, not just to not win the Super Bowl, but to not make the Super Bowl. Unfortunately, the drawback was that the Vikings only faced 3 teams that finished with a winning record: the Packers, the Jags, and the Cowboys. They picked up Gary Anderson from San Francisco and didn't lose anyone big. They took Randy Moss 21st overall. Kayling Wong, a linebacker from Stanford, was also pretty good. And Matt Burke, offensive line from Harvard, went in the 6th round. Dennis Green was the head coach. The GM was Tim Connolly. Quarterbacks, Randall Cunningham was number 1. Brad Johnson was his backup. Jay Fiedler was even on that team. Todd Bowman, too. Mo Williams was hurt. But Leroy Horde and Robert Smith brought things going. Horde, a former Brown. Yeah, Brad Johnson soon would be a quarterback, a Super Bowl winning quarterback with the Bucks. Wide receivers: Chris Carter, Matthew Hatchett, Randy Moss, Jake Reed. Tight ends: Andrew Glover. Offensive linemen: Matt Burke, Jeff Christie, David Dixon, Chris Lewinsky, Randall McDaniel, Todd Struzzi, and a very alive Corey Stringer. Defensive line: Derek Alexander, Dwayne Clemens, Jason Fisk, John Randall, and Tony Williams, among others. Dixon Edwards, Ed McDaniel, Dwayne Rudd, and Kaylee Wong are linebackers of note. Defensive backs: Corey Fuller, Robert Griffith, Jimmy Hitchcock, and Orlando Thomas. Gary Anderson, the kicker. Mitch Berger, the Canadian at punter from Victoria, British Columbia. They were good and all that. The Vikings were sold to Rand McCombs and all that. But anyway, they did not want the Vikings ownership arrangement of 10 owners not owning more than 30%. Rumors were circulating that Tom Clancy, the Vikings had 10 owners not owning more than 30%. They didn't want the consortium. So Tom Clancy, the offer looked like he was going to buy the team, but it didn't. Red McCombs, who was from San Antonio, bought the team, but kept the team in Minnesota. 1998 was a year, remember, for the Vikings. Randall Cunningham, Robert Smith, Chris Carter, Randy Moss doing the job. Their only loss was to Tampa in week 9. 27-24 in Tampa. They beat a lot of teams and all that. So their final win in Tennessee against the Oilers was 26-16. So the Vikings were 15-1, made the playoffs as the 1 seed. The Packers were the 5 seed with 11 wins. The Vikings would take on Arizona in the divisional round, who went into Dallas and shocked the Cowboys. So anyway, Pat Summerall and John Madden would be doing the game on the Sunday afternoon. The Cardinals had a chance, but they failed miserably. Leroy Horde with a touchdown run. Cunningham to Glover for a touchdown. Anderson field goal. Mario Bates got a touchdown for the Cards, but Cunningham to Horde touchdown. Mario Bates another touchdown for Arizona. But Gary Anderson field goal and Cunningham to Moss made it 34-14. Arizona scored late. Another Mario Bates touchdown run, but that was too late as Leroy Horde got his third touchdown of the day himself. In the divisional round, they were supposed to knock down the Falcons and all that. They were 16-1, including the playoff win. Their first 500-point offense in the league since the 83 Redskins, and were heavy favorites. They're up 20-7. Randall Cunningham made a couple of passes and all that. But at the end of the first half, Chris Chandler touchdown to Terrence Mathis, and then they put up a field goal to make it 20-17. The Vikings were going to touchdown to make it 27-17, but the Falcons were forced to turn the ball over on downs, but they fumbled it. Morton would kick a field goal to make it 27-20. In the final 4 minutes, Gary Anderson had a 39-yard field goal to make it a 10-point lead and probably put this game out of reach. But somehow, in some way, he shanked it and missed. What makes it worse is that the weather, you couldn't have an excuse with the weather because it was in a dome. Like in Buffalo, like Scott Norwood had the excuse of the weather, being on a grass turf for probably why he sucked. But it was indoors. It was easy. But somehow Chris Chandler would lead the Falcons to a tying touchdown with Terrence Mathis with 49 seconds left. The Vikings got the ball in overtime but couldn't do anything. And the Falcons ran down the field, and Morgan Anderson, with 4 minutes left in overtime, kicked the field goal. 30-27, Vikings lose to the Falcons, one of the most shocking losses of all time. They had a massive legacy and all that. Randy Moss still has the most receiving touchdowns for a rookie in a season with 17, even though we've got a 17-game season. The Vikings became the third team to post a 15-win season since the 16-game schedule in 1978, but they failed to win the Super Bowl. To date, they are one of only 7 teams to be 15-1 and all that. The 84 Niners, the 85 Bears, both the first 2 teams got to the Super Bowl and won it. The 98 Vikings failed. The 2004 Steelers fell to my Patriots. The 2007 Pats lost the Super Bowl to the Giants. The 2011 Packers couldn't get out of the divisional round. They lost to the Giants. And the 2015 Panthers lost the Super Bowl to the Broncos. So it's weird how the first two 15-1 teams ever actually end up winning the Super Bowl. So yeah, the 2007 Patriots broke the Vikings' 556-point record, pointing at 589. The all-time record is the 2013 Broncos with 606. So yeah, let's take a look at the Vikings. Would they have won the Super Bowl in real life? Maybe. So the Vikings would take on the Broncos. If memory serves me right, the Super Bowl was in Miami, so the Broncos would be technically the home team, if you will. So anyway, then Super Bowl 33 would be the Vikings and the Broncos, like nature intended to, because the Broncos were good. You got Elway versus Moss, if you will. Will John Elway walk out a winner and all that? The Super Bowl was in Miami, and we have an 80 Fahrenheit day. So let's see what happens. Let's play. And the Vikings and the Broncos, the first play, the Broncos kicked off to the Vikings. Randall Cunningham was picked off on the second play of the game by Darius Johnson. Denver had a holding call on them, and then Elway got picked off by Jimmy Hitchcock. The Vikings were roared down the field, 8 plays, 32 yards, and Gary Anderson from 50 yards down the pikey poo. What can you do to make it 3-0? The 98 the Broncos would get the ball. Well, Elway passed to Ed McCaffrey for a 42-yard gain, and then Elway made a nice play to Rod Smith for the touchdown. Extra point good, 7-3 Broncos. Time expires in the first quarter. And then Elam, first play of the second quarter, good, 10-3 with the field goal. Got all that. And then in the final minute, Cunningham threw a pass to David Palmer, who made a spectacular catch, and the Vikings scored a touchdown to tie the game at 10. Jason Elam tried to go for a 47-yard field goal, but went wide left. In the third quarter, the Broncos got the ball first, a couple of punts. Cunningham got picked up by Darian Gordon. And that's it. Fourth quarter, Gary puts up a 30-yard field goal after an 11-play, 53-yard drive to make it 13-10. Elam went down the pikey poo. What can you do for 37 yards, 13-13? And then Elam from 49 through the uprights. So Elam made it 16-13. They kicked the ball off, and it looked like the Broncos were going to win this game. Cunningham got sacked by Harold Hasselback. They had to call timeout, and then Cunningham hit Reed for a 14-yard play. 3rd and 1, out of bounds. Cunningham overthrows Carter, incomplete. So 4th and 1, they were doomed, right? Wrong. He hits Matthew Hatchett for a 17-yard gain, and he goes out of bounds. At the 46 with 26 seconds left, Cunningham passes to Reed for a touchdown play, 6 yards. Then he throws to Matthew Hatchett for 24 yards, and with 3 seconds left, they call timeout, set up a 41-yard field goal. Gary Anderson, poof, it's good. Overtime heroics needed. Minnesota gets the ball first. Cunningham to Moss for 15 yards. Cunningham to Hatchett for 9. Rob Smith runs. They're running it up. 4th and 2 at the 32. They go for 49 yards. And somehow, in some way, Gary Anderson makes the field goal. Overtime heroics. The 98 Vikings are your Super Bowl champions. It was all about the field goals in a sense. Well, Cunningham to David Palmer for a touchdown. And Elway to Rod Smith. Rod Smith was named player of the game. Why? I don't know. Vikings were 8 for 19 on 3rd and 4th down conversions. Broncos were 4 for 14. Vikings 138-81 rushing, passing 247-206. Robert Smith 75 yards, Terrell Davis 62. I don't know why Rod Smith was named player of the game. Cunningham 20 for 32, 252, touchdown, 2 interceptions. Elway 13 for 28, 214, touchdown, interception. Yeah. Elo made from 27, 37, 49. Missed a 47, but Anderson made it 50, 30, 41, 49. So Gary Anderson didn't miss a field goal after all. So yeah, so Gary Anderson's name would not be synonymous with kicking failures. And the Minnesota Vikings would have done what every team tries to be. 15-1 and win the Super Bowl. Now can you dig that? Anyway, I'm going to do.